Hello, Destiny Costa.
Hello, Steve. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for doing this, and I'm really intrigued to hear about because you've been doing the DJ thing for so long, and I want to hear about your history. Did you grow up in Mass?
I did. I grew up in Ipswich, Massachusetts.
Oh, really?
Yes, I'm a North Shore girl.
That's funny. Kenny Chambers, who was just on my show from Moving Target's grandmother lived in Ipswich, and all the music stuff that he started doing was all when he lived in Ipswich. And
Yeah,
I never had talked to anyone before from Ipswich. Now I
it's
have you.
gonna be a thing.
What was it like growing up there? It's a really beautiful area.
Yeah, well, I was born in Portland, Maine, and then my grandparents actually bought an antique home in Ipswich on North Main Street, and my parents ended up there when I was, I don't know, like around four, like little, like two, three, four, or something. So I grew up in an antique home. It was a small town. My family was not from New England. My dad's from New York. My mom's from the Philly area. So there was an element of being an outsider, there to that because I wasn't part of the village, so to speak, and there's families there that go back generations. But it's a beautiful town, really, really beautiful.
Were you close to the ocean?
Oh yeah, I grew up on Cranes Beach.
Cranes Beach.
Yep.
I always thought that was Newburyport, but that's Ipswich.
No. Newburyport would be Plum Island.
Oh, duh. Okay, yeah, I
Okay.
did that. Yeah, sorry, I knew that already. I don't know why
Yeah,
I was thinking.
Cranes, Ipswich, and yeah, beautiful beach.
Did you go
Spoiled.
to did you go to high school in Ipswich?
Did.
So, did you get into music before high school or during high school?
Been into music really my whole life. My father is a huge lover of music. So I was born in 1971, and that's how I got such a hippie type name, which is now more common. Destiny is a more common name now, but in 1971 it was not. And in the 1970s in Ipswich, Mass, it definitely was not. And so I grew up in rooms full of music, all kinds of rock and roll and every sort of music. As music evolved, my father evolved with it. So he wasn't someone that was locked in place with just, I listen to this and only this. So all the old hippie records, the early Bowie records, the Zeppelin records, all the um, Frank Zappa and Crosby, Stills. My mom was into some of the more folk stuff. So everything, just kind of in around a lot of everything. And then when punk came on, my dad was right there with the Sex Pistols and the Clash and all that was being played in my house constantly. So I was exposed to the Talking Heads as the Talking Heads would break. And my uncle, Robert, was the music director for UNH in the late 70s, early 80s. So I actually got to do a weather report on UNH when I was 10 years old. That was fun.
Name actually sounds familiar. Um, was there what did you gravitate towards when you started hearing all that music at a young
Um,
age?
so when I was little, as a little tiny kid, hearing Bowie's Heroes, I thought of superheroes. So it was like cartoon-esque to me. The actual meaning of the song, there was no way. I mean, that was way over my head at 4 years and 5 years old. I was like, superheroes. And Take a Walk on the Wild Side, Lou Reed as a little kid. I pictured people walking by a river and the wild side had like crocodiles and snakes. So it was like hard for me to shake the little tiny kid imagination version of some of these songs. And then when I started to be 10, 11, I actually started to gravitate towards the top 40 because I wanted to just be normal. In a small town school, with the name Destiny. My parents were young. They were in their 20s. Most of my friends' parents were a lot older. So, I wanted to just fit in. So some of the top 40 stuff, I would get into, and then that ended. As soon as I hit like 13, 14, it was over. And I went right to Hendrix and Zeppelin and the Dead and all that stone.
I love that you started with Lou and David Bowie. I mean, that's a really good place to start because they are also two of my favorites. And they were so attached in so many ways. The Transformer album that Lou and Mick Ronson produced,
Yep.
Walk on the Wild Side was on that record. That was like just amazing, that whole thing. So, when you say top 40, was there anything in the top 40 that really grabbed you?
Well, I was 10 the year MTV started. So it was actually top 40 was still kind of cool, right? Joan Jett and the Blackhearts.
81.
I love
Yeah, that's right. You said you were born in
yeah.
71. 81. Yeah, okay.
So, I Love Rock and Roll came out and that was the best. Video Killed the Radio Star was big. So top 10, 40 in that year was still pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um, And I only kind of, Michael Jackson was just breaking, right? So of course everyone had the Thriller album. It was the year of Thriller and Billie Jean and all that stuff that was going on. The Go Go's came out, huge Go Go's when I was little. Singing that at the top of my lungs with my friends in the backyard. Making drums out of tree stumps. That kind of stuff. So yeah.
Were there some real heroes in there for you with some of these rock stars? Like I remember, like to give you an example, when I was a teenager, I was pretty focused on Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, Queen, Pink Floyd, and those guys all like to me were my heroes when I was. Did you have heroes like that?
Um, I was really young when early days of U2. And so U2 and those first few
You
records,
too.
massive U2 fan. I mean, Under a Blood Red Sky and the Boy album, Unforgettable Fire, was a massive record for me when I was young. Just loved it so much. And then I was a huge Zeppelin fan. I mean, just huge. And actually, The Clash, I was 10, stealing my dad would record all of his vinyl onto TDK cassette tapes. And I'd go into his closet and just take whatever I wanted. And so a big one for me was, the Clash albums and, Straight to Hell and Tommy Gun and like all those songs. So those weren't being played on Top 40, but I was in my room listening to them. I was also in my room listening to Steely Dan and Dan Hicks and the Hot Licks,
I knew
and
you were going to drop a million things on me, but I got to ask you a question. I think I'm a big, big vinyl guy. Did your dad do that to preserve his vinyl? Did he record
probably
on cassette so he didn't have to play the vinyl all the time?
I think so. Yeah, when we would go in the car, he could take his music with him in the car. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and, and actually, Herman and the Hermits. That was not even going back younger. I was in the attic and I found some of my uncle's old vinyl. My mother's brother's vinyl. It was Herman and Hermits, and
Mrs. Brown, you've got a lovely daughter.
yeah, and Silhouettes on the Shade, and the Sea Cruise. Ooh wee, baby. Yeah,
So you sound like you're like me. You've been a big music fan for your whole life, and
yeah.
it kind of helps you when you listen to music and you're a kid. Like for me, it was like a big fantasy. What was going on. I want to be like those guys. I want to be a rock star. Like, did you have that same kind of vibe?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I definitely idolized the whole hippie stoner rock world because that's what I was around. And at the time, my father and his friends were hanging out with Ralph Fatello of the Vinnie Band.
Oh
So,
yeah,
so
Vinny.
my father was friends with Vinnie, and my father was best friends with a man named Tom Tremblay, who actually drew the Malcolm Rose. I guess Ralph Fatello used to be in a band called Malcolm Rose, and the Tommy drew the rose, and that's like been artwork in my life, forever. And yeah, so and Lester. So I was around. Can't remember Lester's name, but like I was around Ralph, Vinny, and his bandmates, and my parents were going in to see them in Boston, and that was all when I was 6, 7, 8 years old. So I was around it, kind of on the periphery.
I was in college radio around 80 when you were 10. And I remember playing Vinny. I think they had a 45 that we used to play at WDJM because I was really into the Boston bands like heavy on. So you got exposed to some local people early. That's pretty cool. Your dad sounds really cool.
Yeah, he's on my show with me. Usually he picks 3 songs and we talk a little bit, and
I
yeah,
haven't heard him. I've listened to you a few times, but I haven't heard him yet on your
about
sh
before you might get there before or after he's been on.
Yeah, I want to one of these days I'll listen to a full show. I did
Yeah.
watch your full movie, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Uh, but so high school, 80s, good time to be in high school.
I mean, maybe. I'm a high school dropout, so I did not officially finish high school.
I
Uh,
guess you didn't like high school.
yeah, I was, like I said, I was into I was too busy drinking and, experimenting with the drug scene from like age 14 to all of my teenage years was just really just partying and listening to music and getting wasted as much as possible, and
You weren't alone.
so and that those are like the Zeppelin, Hendrix. I mean, the funny thing is when I gravitated back to that, it's like I'd already heard all that when I was little, and so I was just kind of going back, but I sort of rediscovered it as a teenager.
Hmm.
So it's different when it's something that your parents have on, right? It's in the background, you're just used to it. But when you discover it for yourself, it's like a whole nother level, right? So um, the first time I ever smoked hash was actually with my father. And I was, not that I condone this in any way, shape, or form, but I was proud. And I don't know that my dad would anymore either. Who knows? But we're both sober now. So this goes back a while. But I smoked hash with my dad down in the dining room. I was like, it started to kind of hit. And I was like, okay, this is weird. I'm hanging out with my parents and I dismissed myself. And I promptly went up into my room and I actually put on Hendrix. And I remember thinking, oh, now I get how they kind of dance to this music. It was like a whole nother level of appreciation. And yeah,
Yeah, well, I was the same way when I was a teenager. I probably did more than you did, but I somehow got through it. I don't know how. My senior year is a big like
yeah,
blur. But
pretty to it. So
how old were you when you dropped out of high school?
I would have been 17. So technically, it should have been my senior year, but I was just, smoking weed and going in the front door and going out the back door. So I had but it was hard, right? Because I was trying, and that whole time frame, trying to go to school and being, constantly pulled into the guidance counselor's office and the principal's office, and all the adults asking me, what can we do to help you, and how can we rearrange your schedule? How can we, just failing constantly, and that just, gives birth to a lot of self hatred, right? A lot of self hatred that's kind of already there, a lot of fear that's already there just becomes amplified because now it's, what is wrong with me? So now I need to drink and get high even more because I felt at that time as a kid, that's really all that I was succeeding at. I did high school theater. I played sports, I played softball from third grade to the year I started getting high. I played field hockey all throughout um, middle school and my freshman year of high school. And these are things I loved. But as soon as I started getting high and just drinking a ton, those things all fell by the wayside. So, sort of collapsing into this feeling of constant overwhelm and self loathing, that of course requires more drinking, right? Because now I don't really, I don't need anybody. And, I don't really need to do all that denial, self protecting denial, that I really don't need those things. And then getting just kind of angry at the world because I had no idea how to fit into the world or do the things that the world was expecting of me. So
Well,
I
you must have rebounded at some point because you're a nurse now, so you can't do that without having an education.
I
So just tell me that part first, and then we'll go back to the music. Did you get a GED and then go to college?
went to detox my 18th birthday and I went to Mount St. Pleasant Hospital in Lynn, Massachusetts, and got the little foam smiley face slippers and smiley face slippers, I should say. I was in there with a lot of people a lot older than me that told me they spilled more than I drank, and I had to hold my own and know that like I was already dying inside, and it didn't matter what these older people were saying to me, because what mattered was the fact that I was not functioning when I was getting wasted. And so then I went to a 28-day program in Lynn, Mass, and that was a long. So that started my recovery journey. So yes, I got a GED that same year, and yeah, yeah.
Rehab at 18. Well, that's good. That's early. That's like probably was a good thing for you, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, your
That's
heart
a
has to be your heart broken enough to be receptive, and I've been
I
sober
didn't
now.
mean to laugh. I'm sorry. I was stupid what I said, actually. That was probably good that you went to rehab. Of
It
course it
was
was.
effective. No, I mean, no, of course it was good, but I mean, it's not easy for people, and even getting sober at 18 doesn't mean that that was easy. So yeah.
So what happened after that? Were you still like full on into the music when you went through that whole experience? And then when what did you do after that? Did you I mean, I know you've been in radio for a while, and did that happen immediately at a young age?
No, not at all. I never even thought about being in radio. I was doing, like I said, I was doing some theater in high school, and people said I was pretty good at it. And I remember, apart from just like, drinking and listening to music and getting stoned or whatever, I liked theater because I loved all of the anxiety that I had in regular life was sort of alleviated because now I had a script and I was playing a character on stage. So I knew what my purpose was on stage. So I was able to channel some good energy in that way. And I got good feedback. It was something I got good feedback on, which wasn't happening to me a lot. One of the things that really was hard for me as a kid was when I wasn't allowed to do theater anymore because I had straight F's in school. So I couldn't partake in the extracurricular activity of theater. So, no, what happened to me when I got out of rehab and stuff is I went full on into meetings and all that, but I couldn't listen to music. It took me a while. I was listening to, actually, that's not true. So this is where, like U2's Bad album was really, in my early days of recovery, um, that was a huge deal. Some of those songs were just like, sort of homecoming, very spiritual,
Right.
very um, just trying to get your life together. But I couldn't listen to the stuff I loved, like the Zeppelin, the Hendrix, the Dead, all those things I was listening to, the Doors, all that stoner rock. Because I just wanted to I didn't know how to do it without a joint, or a beer in my hand. I just didn't know how to do that. So it took a
I
while
get
for
that.
me
I
to,
get that.
yeah, to come back to like what I liked. And yeah, so, and I was sober for like a year and then found myself going out to California, which is like the next piece. So
Did you go?
radio came way later, like way later.
I'm sorry.
Radio came way late, much later.
Did you go to California to pursue an acting career?
Not intentionally, no. This is a whole story that I don't. This is the tricky part of how Destiny gets to California. Is a kind of intense, wild story, actually, that I maybe won't go into all the details of because
Give us the
it's
short version.
the short version is I was I had a boyfriend who was having some, we'll say, family difficulty, to put it mildly, and he was seeing a therapist, and and I was like an 18, 19-year-old kid, trying to get my own head together. And he was kind of falling apart. And so the therapist wanted to get him somewhere. I don't know. It was a long, I don't feel comfortable telling that. It's like, I don't know how people will receive it. So I'm kind of, anyway, we essentially got,
Don't tell it.
huh? Yeah,
Don't tell it then.
it's wild. Maybe
Where,
another day.
okay, I'm gonna cut right here. Where did you go when you went to
Well, what
California?
happened was, I'll tell you the lightest version is the therapist got us money for a one-way ticket to wherever this kid felt safe. We'll put it
Get
that
out,
way.
really?
I swear to God. So we got money from Easter Seals to pick a place where we felt safe. So we chose San Francisco. So we like looked at the map and we're like, it's nuts. We got put into hiding in Jamaica Plain. I mean, it was nuts. It's a crazy story. So I didn't plan on going to California to pursue an acting career. I was in my first semester of North Shore Community College, like 19-year-old kid trying to go to AA meetings and like get sober. And this wild, insane thing happens. We get put on a Greyhound bus across the country. My parents didn't know where I was. They actually ended up filing a missing persons report. Here I am telling the
Wow.
story. So we land in San Francisco. I've never been there, don't know anybody. We have no money. So we land at the Greyhound station in San Francisco, not knowing what we're doing. And people, I'd never been out there. Nothing. I'm 19 years old, 1 year sober. And I'm with this guy who's like having nervous breakdowns, essentially, and trying to keep him together.
Was he a lot older than you?
He was only 2 years older than me. So he was like 22 at the time.
Okay.
And so we landed at a homeless shelter on south of Market Street. And on Bryant Street, I forget the name of it. But anyway, some of it's blacked out because I think it was so intense. And over the years, don't know how people are going to receive that story. So I ended up in a homeless shelter, and yeah, that's how I got into this film that you watched.
Oh, okay. Let's segue to that then. So, did
Yeah.
you meet people there?
Yes. So none of this stuff is traditional. It's not like I auditioned for a film. It's not like I tried to get in radio. I was just this kid trying to stay sober, trying to do life, and a bunch of weird shit happened. And I got thrown out to California. I'm in this homeless shelter. And like I said, I had done some theater stuff in high school. And um, I saw a flyer for an acting workshop for homeless people. And a couple of the other women. Now, this was intense. I'm this girl from Ipswich, Mass, right? I'm a kid. I'm in this huge city. You went to California, like it's big.
Yes, I
It's not.
did.
So you're out there, it's like, oh my God, there's like 5 lanes of traffic and it's a lot. And
San Francisco, I lived in LA for for like 14 years, but San Francisco is way edgier than LA. I mean, it's more like a city there.
really,
That's why they
yeah,
call it the city.
yeah, that's good to know. Yeah, and we ate at the Food Not Bombs bread line at Civic Center. And like, it was a wild time. And I look back now and I just think, wow, because even telling the story is just like, holy crap. Like, no, I didn't go to college. I went to a homeless shelter in San Francisco with zero direction, zero connections, no money. And so I went to this acting workshop and it was wild because it was for homeless people, right? So there was severe homeless people. There was a lot of, we sat in this circle and did this improvisational stuff that was very raw and intense. And I was like, okay, well, this is cool. And it was a good outlet for me. And I went back like for a couple of weeks. And then the people running the acting workshop were like, okay, they liked a couple of the improv things I did. So they were like, we're going to give you this script. We're going to go. We went to like Sixth and Fulton, I don't know, south of Market. So if you've ever been in San Francisco, south of Market is rough.
Okay,
It's
yeah, yeah.
So we're at this little convenience store, and they're like, okay, we want you to, you're going to play this character. You're going to play this guy's girlfriend. Here's your 5 lines or whatever it is, 3 to 5 lines, whatever. Learn these lines. These are your intentions, and we're going to film it. I'm like, okay, whatever. So it was like a one
Okay,
take.
before you continue any further, is this chalk?
Yes.
Okay, so for people out there listening, Destiny was in a film, 1996, called Chalk. I actually saw the film, which we'll get into in a second, but you can find it on Vimeo. Vimeo. Did I say that right? Vimeo. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about Chalk. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I wanted to give everyone a little
Thank,
perspective.
thank you. Because I'm just kind of, the stories do just kind of like, so we go onto this corner, and I'm supposed to play this girl who's mad at her boyfriend or whatever. And it gets kind of hectic or whatever. And he's mad. I've got like scream and care. I was nuts, right? So they film it, and when it was over, they stopped. And I'm not making this up. This was wild, right? But remember, I had all these pent up emotions to use, right? Because I'm, new sobriety, but in this wild situation, and was just in hiding in Jamaica. It was nuts, right? So let it all out, right? And so they stopped everything, and this guy Don Bima, who was playing the lead role, um, he and the
He was
director
the guy
stopped
that was your boyfriend in the film? Oh man, we're
Yeah,
going to talk about him in a minute. Go ahead.
they, they stopped everything. They literally stopped everything. They came up to like, "Who are you?" And I'm like, like, "Who are you? You have to come back to our workshop." Like, what? There was like everything stopped and centered around me, which was wild. So of course I went back, and so I went to that workshop, and it turned out is this great thing people can look into. Called Tenderloin Action Group. And the director is Rob Nielsen, who's won an award at the Cannes Film Festival in 1979. He's been making independent films. He's well known in the independent film world. And so they initially were going to shoot a movie called Hope for the Fourth Ace that was going to have Whoopi Goldberg in it and Danny Glover, I believe, were going to play some of the roles, but they couldn't get funding. And so they went to create this workshop for homeless people. And they decided we're just going to grab people off the street and put them in our movie. And I met, obviously lifelong friends there and got written a role in this film. And it was awesome. It was cool.
Well, the film is really heavy. It's let's say it's kind of like a way edgier version of like Color of Money, which was a film with Tom Cruise and Paul Newman, based on like early pool. It's a film about pool, and there's not very many of them out there that are this. I was really impressed with it. It was a lot of unknown actors that I never had seen before, but the acting was really good, and I thought it was shot really well. Um, you're actually in the craziest scene, I think, in the whole film. There's a scene where you're with your boyfriend, and he's a psycho. And I don't know how else to tell this except to just tell it. Should I just tell what happens, or should I make people go watch it?
Go watch, go watch it.
Okay, there's a real heavy scene. I'm not going to get into it, but I can't imagine what it would have been like for you having to play
Hmm.
be in that scene where the lines were very heavy. Was that difficult for you?
Yes. So that was very intense. Actually, that's a there we were improvising. So the part about this film as well is that we had a script. Some of the stuff was, line by line. Most of it was improv. I'm not as like a well-educated film person, but the director Rob Nielsen was a friend of John Cassavetes, and actually Jenna Rollins did a benefit for us, and Diamanda Galas did a benefit for us. Tom Waits, I got to meet Tom Waits. He did a benefit for us. Greg Allman. I mean, it was a wild time in my life. Like Greg Allman did a benefit for us in this small local pool hall. I stood like 2 feet from the guy. It was nuts. But yes, so that whole thing was improvised. And I
It's
didn't
amazing.
not know that I was going to be asked to do that particular thing until the day of. So they took me for a walk. Don and Rob took me for a walk, and I'm like 20 years old, and they were like, 40 and 50, and they're like, okay, so he's going to ask you, to do this thing or whatever. And I was like, well, I look back and go, yeah, well, I'm not doing that. I go, and they're like, no, 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 you're not going to do it. It's just that like, Dorian's unraveling and like he's losing it, and you're his anchor, and like you're not. I said, well, yeah, I'm not doing anything. No, so we improvised that. So that scene was
Wow.
tough. It was tough, and I wasn't a trained actor, and like so I will say when I punched him, I punched him, and so we still laugh about it to this day. He had like a bruise on his face. It was rough. It was
You
rough.
were fantastic. I can't believe that have you been in anything else besides that film?
No,
That's
no.
remarkable. You're a really good actress. I was like, and plus you got singled out too in some of the reviews and stuff that I saw where they mentioned your name because you were like, maybe fourth or fifth on the list in terms of the call sheet. I'm very familiar with films because I was in a few films myself, and I worked for Michael Douglas for 2 years. So I was in the music division, but I saw him all the time, and I used to run into actors and actresses all the time. I went to tons of film openings. I was an assistant music supervisor in some films. Like I said, I was in film in a few films, and I know that scene is really difficult and it's really hard to get into. So I think it's fantastic that you did that. And I didn't know if I was going to like the film because I started watching and I'm like, oh, I don't know about this. But then you lit the screen up. So I kind of like, I thought, there were some other really good. The Asian guy, I thought he was excellent.
Well, he has gone on to be like a TV actor in like Hawaii. You can look up Calvin Hanyi. He's in stuff constantly. He's a TV actor now, like well known.
He was
So
great. He was
yeah,
great.
and Tim
So
Summer of Primus is in that film as well, and he also scored the film. So
I thought that guy looked familiar. Yeah, I know.
yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
Wow.
And actually, Greg Allman's manager is also in that film. He's one of the guys that helps drag the surfer off the beach. That's one of those guys. Well, actually, one of those guys, it's two of them. Harvey Mandel of Canned Heat and Greg Allman's manager are the guys that pull that surfer off the beach if you got to that part in the film.
I
Yeah.
did. I watched the whole film. They put him on a
Yeah.
surfboard and carried him off. See, I watched it. Uh, the ending was a little weird to me, and
Yeah.
once again, I don't want to tell people the ending because I want them to watch it. It didn't end the way I thought it was going to end. I thought it was going to end differently than it did. But you know what? That's the beauty of film. You never know what's going to happen. So, how long did you stay in San Francisco for?
In that whole area for about 10 years. So after the film was done, um, you know, doing its thing, or whatever. I was pretty sick, and I'd been in California for a couple of years, and I was starting to, you know, feel like I should go back home for a little bit. So I went back to the Boston area for a year, and then I went back. So after I went back out, I stayed for about 9, 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
So went back and forth that quickly.
yeah. Well, I was out there for like, well, 2 years. Um, yeah, the film opened in the like 92, I want to say. We started 92. It didn't get released until around 96, I think. But
Okay, I have to ask
yes.
you about the music scene because San Francisco's always had a good music scene. Were you going out to a lot of shows when you were there?
Nope. Nope. I
No.
was trying to stay sober. I was trying to keep my head, man. I was working in a homeless shelter as a like the low, the residential counselor in this homeless shelter for families, and then I also worked in a homeless shelter for runaway teenagers and stuff. So I was
You're
doing
doing
that,
good
make
stuff.
and pay my rent. And I couldn't go to. I didn't know. I was in my early 20s, and I was kind of a lone wolf. Like I would go to the acting workshop, and those were like, that's where I was interacting with people, which is cool. It's like Tim Alexander, the drummer. I'm hanging out with the drummer of Primus. I'm hanging out with, all these crazy people. But
What happened to the guy?
oh, yeah, we broke up.
It's
No,
funny because while you were out there during that time period, I don't know what made me think of this because I know you know Linda Mandolin, and she was in Fabulous Disaster in San Francisco during that time frame, but you guys didn't know
no.
each other then.
BCN was out there too. I was like, again, I was in my early 20s. I was trying to stay sober. And, hard for me because I was around, I wasn't, I was going to a ton of meetings and I made a lot of great friends, in my meetings and all that. But I really was trying to just honestly stay sane because getting sober so young, it was very easy to think, oh, maybe it wasn't that bad, maybe, but so I clung to just staying sober, going to my job, doing the acting thing, going to my meetings, doing my sober thing. So I just did not want to drink. So I was focused primarily on that. And I kick myself sometimes now because I'd, walk down Haight Street and see like Nirvana on the bills for these small clubs. And I remember, and Dinosaur Jr. And I remember I was too scared to go in because I
I
was
was
afraid
there
I'd
with the
drink.
neighborhoods around that time, actually.
Yeah, I was too freaked out to like go in and I didn't know, if I'd be able to. I was underage for some of it, A, and then B, I was like, man, I don't know if I can do that and not get loaded.
I used to go up there a lot in the 80s and the 90s. I haven't been there probably since the middle of the 90s. I always liked San Francisco though, and because it's just a great visually, it's a beautiful place. It's like an East Coast, it's like a West Coast Boston, but it's even more, when you could see Alcatraz when you're walking down there near the waterfront and all that, and it was great. So when did you come back to Mass for good?
I want to say probably like 2003, 2003.
Is
I
that
actually
with
came
you?
back to,
Go ahead, sorry.
go ahead. No, I went, I had gotten married and had a baby and actually two kids. And then we came back and moved to Virginia. And within a few months, he took off with another woman. And my grandmother was like, "You come back here with those babies." And so I went up to Ipswich and with my grandmother and my family, brought my two kids in diapers. And yeah, man. And did that whole thing, like single mom with two kids in diapers thing, and went back to North Shore Community College and started taking some classes, trying to figure out like what I should do or be. And yeah, a friend of mine had said, maybe I'd be a good nurse. And I thought, oh, me, the high school dropout that like could never do math or whatever. Um, so yeah, I
And you
started
are
doing that, and then
and you are a nurse now.
now I am.
Um, what about BCN? When did that happen?
So that's a whole another thing. That was very a wild thing, sort of very similar to Chalk, actually, where I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't. It just kind of happened upon me, right? Which is something to be so grateful for. It blows my mind sometimes, right? So I'd had my two boys. I came as back in Massachusetts, and then I got in another relationship with someone, and then he and I moved to upstate New York. And I remember we listened to the last BCN broadcast up in, we were up in New York, and that was just an intense day. We had it on. We were It was sad. For anyone that grew up in the Boston area, we were lucky. I was actually going to mention that before with music because BCN was a massive. I mean, I always listened to that in high school. Always listened to BCN. Oh God, which brings me to like the Del Fuegos and Love and Rockets and all that stuff. That was huge in high school. I can't believe I didn't remember them. But anyway, so we listened to that. And then when we were moving back, we were coming back to Massachusetts from New York. And actually, my father was starting to go to school in his later life. And my ex husband and I were like, he should really be in radio with his love. He should really do radio. And so my ex husband actually knew of Sam Copper because I guess my ex had done the BCN listener line a couple times. And so that was when BCN went off the air on the FM dial. And Sam Copper, which was one of the original, program directors of BCN in the early, late 60s when BCN started. So CBS gave Sam Copper the task of recreating the early days of BCN, the whole freeform style, but doing that in HD radio and online streaming, which was like in 2009-ish, right? Which was would have been very new technology, right? Online
Hmm.
streaming, new. So I started listening to Sam, and there was a lot going on in my life at that time. It was just really intense and heavy. And I remember we came back, and I started listening to Sam, and he was on every Tuesday and Thursday. And it was the first time that I had heard radio that moved me again in a long time because commercial radio had just become at that time, 2009, it was just, same playlist. They're still playing all the same songs you're playing
Yeah.
when we were, it was like not many new things. And listening to Sam's shows were incredible. And then he would talk about things, current events that were going on. And he had Danny Schechter, the news dissector, which was a person who was on early BCN. And I would just break down the news in a way that was like just next level, and I would just hang on every word. So they actually just breathed life into me at a time that was like very sad for me. And so I started listening. And so this is relevant, right? So Facebook was also relatively new. So Sam would do his shows and then he would post on Facebook, right? And so there's this group of us you could now talk to the DJ in real time on Facebook. You could post while they were on, new to everybody, right? Nobody had done this before, right? And then a lot of us sort of became friends and we could make requests and Sam and I became friends. And then Sam bought a bus because he was going to convert this school bus into a broadcast station, which he had done back in the 70s and 80s with Starfleet, recording all kind of live broadcasts. So he's like, I'm doing this again. We're bringing BCN back. And we're going to do it the way we did it before the corporate people took over, and he was very driven. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So my ex and I ended up going down to Sam Copper's house to help him gut this bus and sand the floorboards and do the thing. And Sam met me in person and he said to me, we were talking, we're just hanging out, working on the bus, whatever. And we're in his house trying to get, having something to eat. And he looks across the island in his kitchen and he goes, you got a really good rap. You should do radio. And it was one of those moments where it kind of hung in the air for a minute. And I just go, okay, when do I start? And the next thing I know, I have a show on the Freeform BCN. And I'd never done radio before, ever. I'd never seen a radio board, except for, I did the weather on UNH when I was 10. It's not the same. So I was pretty driven because I loved BCN as a kid, and the way that you and I remember it in the 80s, those early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, it was just so good, right? And I agonized for hours putting a playlist together, and I drove down. I was living in Stratham, New Hampshire at the time, and I drove all the way down to Sam was living kind of near Quincy. What's that town? Not anyway, I can't think of it right.
Braintree?
No,
Braintree?
no. It's escaping me at the time. Anyway,
Millis? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Let me ask you a question though, because I don't want to forget what I want to ask you. You had posted a photo not too long ago. Carter was in. I ran into Carter Allen actually about 3 weeks ago. We've known each other for a long, long time, mostly because I worked at labels, and he ended up doing a radio show at the college station I was at right after I left WDJM in Framingham. But he was working at BCM, but he was also doing a college show. It wasn't that uncommon. There was a photo you posted, and he was in it, and some other people were in it. When was that taken?
Oh, that was taken at live at 1265. It was there was an event, and it was the first time I met Carter and Tank came down. Is that the one you're talking about? Where
Yeah.
Tank? Yeah.
How long ago was that?
Oh gosh, that was like 2011 or 12 or something.
So it was already after you had been doing the free
Yeah,
form BCM. Carter wasn't involved anymore, though, was he?
he wasn't. Nope. He just was coming down, in support of. Well, actually, there's a couple different events. That live at 1265. I forget what was going on that day. There are other pictures of me, and that was, but I don't know that I'm with Carter in that one. There's other ones where it was Carter's book signing, which was
Oh
also,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, he did an event at Joe's Albums in Worcester. I missed it, but I just perfect timing. I went in there and it was a Monday morning at like 10:30 and there's Carter Allen and we hadn't seen each other in years, so that was really good running into him.
I
He's a
really
really
nice.
good guy.
Yeah.
How long did the BCN freeform thing last?
I 6 years, almost, yeah, it's almost just about 6 years. So I think Sam started in I say the spring of 2009. I may be wrong about the exact date of that. I know I started doing a show in, I believe it was October of 2010.
See, that's
I
why I probably thought you've been in it for a long time because you were doing that for a long. 6 years is a long time at one
a long
station.
time. And CBS pulled the plug on that right before my show. David Woolman was on. He was doing a show, and right in the middle of his show, it was over. They just ended it and put on some lounge music.
Was there any space for you in between BCN and Mark Skin Radio, or did you just go over to Mark Skin like soon thereafter?
Soon thereafter. And so Mark Skin Radio came out of all of the people that became friends on the Freeform BCN Facebook group. So that whole pool of people is Mark Skin Radio. I mean, really. So in those early days when Sam was doing Freeform BCN on Facebook, we would all talk. And it was this cool community where it was doing what radio really should do, right? Which is bringing people together around music. And then all these cool friendships were born. So when Sam was doing his shows on Facebook, I would be there, Marion Farrell would be there, Chris Johnson would be there, Tim Clancy, Mark Schultz, Nancy Walton, all these people, Mark Kruger. And we'd all be talking during Sam's shows, and we became really good friends over the years. And they were so sweet. When I got a show, they were just all so happy for me and really supportive and kind. And Chris Johnson decided to start his own station. And so Chris Johnson started Mark Skin Radio, and wanted to sort of do that. And he started with Mark Schultz and Tim Clancy, and they started Mark Skin.
There's no
Um,
Mark Skin.
huh?
There's no person named Mark Skin.
No, and Mark Skin is a weird radio name, right? Like I'm always like I'm on Mark Skin Radio, but it's something he and his Chris and his son, like back in when you could pick your skins, when like I think it was like the thing on the you could pick a skin for your music or whatever, you like
Oh,
your
okay. All
like
right.
that sounds different, right? It sounds like edgy and whatever. Anyway, they started that, and Chris, that was on live. We were on live 365 at first, so it was a little bit of a break. I've had a couple breaks here and there, when I've been doing things, and I'll jump back on. But Chris is awesome.
So
Yeah.
how often are you on the radio these days?
Well, it usually is once a week. So right now, due to technical difficulties, my show is on hiatus until my computer gets. Once again, my computer needs some TLC. So
So you
once
do it
that's
all from home,
yes, yeah, it's
like
all
I
digital.
like I'm doing this podcast with you right now.
Yeah.
And by the way, thank you for, you and Mike Newman have contributed, I think, two two shows,
Two, yeah, two, maybe three.
three
Uh,
maybe. I'm sorry.
okay, that's all right.
There's only 366 of them. I'm trying to keep track of everything, but
I really appreciate that you wanted to work with me and Mike. So thank you for that because
that was my
it's
idea. Well, actually, Mike came to me and he was interested in starting his own podcast. And then when I started explaining all the details and everything to him, and he seemed like, I don't know, he seemed like it was going to be a lot. I said, "Hey, I have an idea. Why don't you guys just interview some bands and I'll just put it out through my network and then you don't have to do anything." So I'm waiting for you guys to do more, actually, because I like what you did.
it's great. It's awesome to get to know you and work with you. So I we appreciate it. It's been fun, and we're definitely going to do more. Hey, why not, right?
Yes, I'm happy to hear that. I actually have something else I'm going to ask you about when we get done here today. But what I want to do before we leave is I want you to tell me what you're listening to right now, what's good, what's happening, what is going on in terms of music for you right now.
In terms of music for me,
Are you like really into the Boston scene more than anything? Or are you like li listening to a wide range of music?
it's always a wide range. The thing is with I am a nurse, right? So I just started a new job, 12-hour shifts in a hospital. So I've been sort of consumed in that, like making sure that
And
I'm
thank you for that, by the way. People always want to thank the military and everything, but I think we should be thanking nurses and doctors and and you folks just as much for everything that you do.
thank you. So when I get all consumed, honestly, when nursing gets in, I've been doing, long-term care, hospice nursing. Now I'm starting in a hospital, and when things get like that, I end up living in like Nick Drake. Like I just need something
Nick Drake, good one.
soothing and like just beautiful and calm. That being said, I'm a big punk rock fan too. I like all kinds of music, right? So Michael Kiwanuka just put out a new album. It's really, really beautiful. I love Crow Follow from the Boston scene. Jennifer Taps in the Strange, that record that she put out last year is phenomenal. Lavina Falls, I've got to listen to that one a little bit more. And of course, Girl with a Hawk. I mean, yes, all those Boston bands that we play. Oh my God! And um, Greg Allen and the Fringe Religion. I wish I had discovered him, in his music sooner, but I'm really psyched to discover him,
Greg's a
like in
good friend. Greg's a good friend of mine. She's
that.
Stoned is one of the greatest songs ever, I think. You know the song She's Stoned? I
I
love
don't know if
that
I
song.
happens when I like one is I live in that song for a while, and the Madonna hole is just fantastic. And then what is it? I need a cigarette or something. And then I was listening to it on the way home from work a couple months ago, and it just makes me so happy because it's rock and roll. Ooh, and Satch Karen's another, and he just collaborated. Who's he collaborating with?
Let
That
me
I'm just
say
so excited.
something about Greg before we just go on because I like talking about Greg. The more I listen to Greg and I listen to his phrasing and everything, I realize that he's a big Lou Reed fan. And then I asked him about that one day and he said that was really perceptive because if you listen to his phrasing, it's very Lou-like.
That vibe. That's
Yeah.
that part of the vibe I love. It's just a kind of kicked back, pretty. We don't give a shit. Like who
Big
cares?
compliment too. When you compare someone to Lou Reed, it's a compliment as far as I'm concerned. I love Lou.
100% compliment. And yeah, so and I'm probably leaving people out. There's so many oh, well, Linda Mandolin's, I mean, there are so many incredible musicians in our local music scene, and just so many. And I hate trying to list them because I'll forget ones that I love,
Oh, you named
and
quite a few.
yeah. Well, the Zip Ups have a great song I've been loving, and I can't remember the name of it. But it's great. And then there's the Daylilies, or I mean, you could go on and on, really. And I feel honored that I get to do that, right? Like, who am I, right? Who am I? I'm not a musician. I'm like a mom with 3 kids and a nurse now, and like I just feel so lucky that I kind of came into this radio thing that people want to listen to my shows.
Yeah, you're doing a real service. You might not realize it, but radio is not dead in my mind. It's just taking on a different form.
Yeah,
Like People call my show a radio show. I only play like a few songs. I'll play a couple songs in this show. I'm not sure what I'm going to play yet, but I will. Maybe you put a few ideas in my head, actually. You you did. So I have a great idea what song I'm going to play now. Thank you. But I think that you're doing a really good service. So I can understand why people love you too. So many people talk about you in a high positive way.
Thank you. That's nice to hear. Life is hard enough, man. Life is hard, and we don't need to make it harder for each other. And music is the sustenance. Like if as a creative person, I mean, again, sometimes I wonder, like, yeah, what would it have been like if I had the opportunity to have gone to college to pursue acting? If I'd had, a rich family that could have backed me up and sent me to LA to go. Who knows how my life would have been different had I had those certain resources at my disposal. Where would I be now, right? Who knows? Because I am a creative person, but I've had to survive. I've had to pay the rent. So my focus
Paid your
is,
dues.
right? I'm a mother. I've got 3 kids. I need to work. I don't have time to not be able to feed my kids and, so I feel extremely lucky that somehow the universe gave me this outlet of radio. And I get to know people like you, people who are still committed to being creative, who are still see the value in what we're doing. There is value in that. Sorry, I got a phone call. Can you see me?
Yeah, I
There
was
we
wondering who Destiny Costa was for the longest time. We're social media friends, but I'd never met you. So I was like,
Yeah,
oh, and
yeah.
now here we are.
And
Um,
I like just one thing, like the to help these musicians, but hear their music too, right? Like it keeps me going. It's just, the everything that all of these artists do and the things you're doing, the service you do to shine a light on people, that we're still out here. We may not be mainstream, nobody's making it big, but we still are, our art and our voices matter and it's important. So yeah.
we're shining a light on you right now. Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Thank you very much.
All right.